So we all saw Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan's tweet on the recent budget, and we all had our views, and we expressed them through comments, through emails, through letters. But apart from that, I think there are some deeper questions. Questions about where we send our children to school, where we go in case of a medical emergency, and where we live. And these are questions that deserve deeper answers. So to get those deeper answers from the man himself, we sit down with Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan and decode the budget. Hello everybody, thank you for tuning in. This is Team FDR and today we are in conversation with our founder and General Secretary, Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan. Hello sir.
Hello Akshat.
So we all saw your initial views on the budget, and although that we learned a lot from it, but I think that left a few questions unaddressed and we'd like to maybe pick your brains on those in this conversation. So without further ado, sir, I'll get right into it. First off, sir, the Indian economy has been clocking impressive numbers for the past few years consistently. Yet, some sections of the population remain unhappy. Is the growth tide not taking everybody along, sir? And if that is the case, do you think this budget addresses that?
Absolutely right on the first point. Our growth is not inclusive enough. Now, as they say, a rising tide lifts all boats. So everybody is benefited to some extent. But a large proportion is not benefited to an extent where they feel the impact on their lives. They feel optimistic about their children's lives. So it's more like survival mode. Now, that's not inclusive enough. And if it's not inclusive enough, why will 80% of people who are excluded from the growth process in their minds, why will they support? Because growth entails some sacrifice. Yeah. If a family wants to grow, you are trying to curtail today's expenditure to invest for tomorrow. You are trying to give up today's leisure and comfort to work hard to build a tomorrow. Yeah. Now, when will I work hard today instead of enjoying leisure? When will I save money today instead of consuming today? When I feel that tomorrow is going to be much better. It's worthwhile investing this, right?
Yes.
Now, if that faith is not there, the bulk of the people will say, no, we don't want a tomorrow because I don't see much of a tomorrow. I want today. That is a short-term gratification, instant gratification. That's the reason why parties are compelled to give all kinds of free things, free electricity, free water, free rice, free this, free that. Now, welfare is required. When people are in distress, you cannot let them starve. Yeah. And in a democracy, you have to carry everybody with you. Therefore, welfare is required. But if that welfare is not adequately balanced by tomorrow's growth and investment, we perpetuate poverty. Yeah. And that's exactly what we do not need as a country. So the first part, you're absolutely right. Mm-hmm. The second part, no, not adequately. Because if really, it's not that one budget can address it, let's be truthful, because these are long-term structural problems. And two, it's not always a budget issue, because I may allocate money, but it doesn't mean anything in terms of inclusion. But to the extent that the budgets can repair it, I don't think enough attention has been paid. Now, for instance, what can budgets do? You can actually come up with a comprehensive healthcare program, even if it's not implemented overnight, a roadmap, because evidence shows two things. About 50 to 60 million people are descending into poverty every year. There are some claims that the out-of-pocket expenditure in healthcare has come down from something like 58% to 39%. Yeah. But unless we see adequate evidence, it's very difficult to sustain those numbers. Yeah. Because while government expenditure has gone up a little bit, overall healthcare expenditure globally is going up much more. Yeah. So there is no evidence to suggest that a bit of more allocation by the governments, state and union, is significantly reducing the out-of-pocket expenditure. So as of now, I still go by the figure of 50-60 million people descending into poverty every year. The second number which should alert us is there's something called disability-adjusted life years. Mm-hmm. That means how much time have you lost because of disability. Yeah. Now, disability can be old age. Mm-hmm. That is inevitable. Probably on a 100,000 population base, about 15,000 years, I'm giving a ballpark number, can be attributed to old age and things like that. Yeah. Maybe there are some issues which are difficult to prevent. Yeah. So let's assume 15, 20 is okay. But we're at 39,000. That means a removable tragedy, an avoidable tragedy is affecting about 19-20% of our people, or 19-20% of our time.
Yeah.
We are losing that much time on productivity and quality of life because of sickness. Now, unless there is at least a medium and long term comprehensive healthcare delivery program in mind, and then we start the process, not only allocating resources, we continue to languish in poverty. Inclusion is not enough. I'll only mention another thing. We can move on to other areas of discussion.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely certain that the big cities are getting a lot, not from budgets, but intellectual capital has moved there, financial capital has moved there, land values are appreciating, and we are getting all kinds of global supply chain integration, like the software companies, the global capacity centers, GCCs, and all sorts of things. But unless the large number of unorganized workers, the poor unorganized workers, who have very low level of skills, who don't have a regular secure monthly wage, unless they are included in the economic growth project, that means formalized with some dignity, reasonable wage, we can't afford very high wages right now, and a chance of future prosperity. Unless that happens, you cannot have inclusion in the country. Now, that will not happen if big cities are the only centers of growth. Many studies indicate, again, ballpark numbers I'm giving. You take Mumbai, Chennai, Delhi, Kolkata. Perhaps Kolkata is declining as a share, but Kolkata is definitely part of that. Then Hyderabad, Bengaluru, Pune, Ahmedabad. These cities account for about 50% of the consumer demand in many areas, except the basic necessities. Now, these cities account for maybe about 15 crore population. Now, can 15 crore population, if that accounts for 50% of consumer demand, and the balanced people are consuming only half of that, there's something seriously wrong with our country. It's not merely in terms of economic disparities, personal wealth, but regional, sub-regional disparities. Unless small towns grow, because urbanization is inevitable, and modernization and urbanization and economic growth and prosperity go together. So unless small towns grow, it's impossible to really include the bulk of the unorganized workers in the formal sector and give them a future. While there is some talk about second and third tier cities, I don't see much of an emphasis. So a lot more could have been done. Not that in one day you can address these challenges, but that roadmap is somewhat missing.
Sir, Akshat's question reminds me that the budget has allocated 12.2 lakh crores rupees for the capital expenditure. However, it did not do much for welfare schemes. A lot of people are agitated when it comes to growing economic inequalities in the country, sir. Is fiscal prudence coming at the cost of people's welfare?
Okay. First of all, the capital expenditure, if the totality is about 17 lakh crores. This 12.2 lakh crores is obvious infrastructure, your roads, your highways, and your ports, and your railways, and so on and so forth. But there are many other programs where there is some capital investment, including in centrally sponsored schemes. Many of them may be micro. For instance, if the government gives assistance for housing, it's also capital investment. But anyway, let's leave that aside. Earlier, Akshat and I, when we were talking, we briefly discussed. In our lives, Sharanya, your own personal life, my own personal life, there's always a clash for immediate desire to consume. Maybe consuming time, maybe consuming money, maybe consuming food, whatever. You want to immediately consume, versus taking care of your immediate needs but building a better tomorrow. It's a daily clash in every household, in every human being's mind. I have the same problem at a personal level, right? My family has the same problem. Your family has the same problem. Now, you have to make sure that the basic needs are met. There's no question about it. But who will make sure? Let's go to fundamentals. What is the role of the government? The government is something that you and I collectively created artificially. God did not create a government. And therefore, you are basically saying, I am in problems. You have a duty to help me. Does it make sense? So fundamentally, welfare is a questionable proposition. But that is the extreme libertarian point of view. Let me continue the logic. What it means is the government is here to fulfill the basic needs of the society, fundamentally. Collective needs of the society, not individual needs. Because these needs are necessary for our happiness, for our well-being, for the quality of life, but we cannot fulfill ourselves. A simple example I keep giving is mosquito. No matter how powerful, wealthy, successful you are, the mosquito that bites the neighborhood urchin will come and bite you also. Now, that will transmit the virus because mosquitoes are truly socialist. They don't regard your power, your position, your caste, your status, your money. In the process, they transmit so many disease-causing viruses and you may be seriously sick. Now, however much we do, we cannot really control mosquitoes individually. We are trying our best. India is the only country where we all try to control mosquitoes individually, but collectively mosquitoes keep growing. You have all night, all out, all kinds of ecosystem, the whole economy has developed in the country. But it has to be collectively done. The roads on which you have to travel, the water supply to your homes, you have to pay for that. But somebody has to design it and build it and make it work. Controlling the pollution in the streets. Make sure that there is no flooding just because there's a bit of a rainfall. Sewerage system, particularly as you go into bigger and bigger conglomerations, not merely a small village or something, you require sophisticated sewerage systems to protect your health and water bodies and so on and so forth. And of course, public order, protecting you from crime and theft and violence and all kinds of things. And of course, defend your boundaries, your borders, your country, your tribe. The old days is tribe, now it's a nation. So there are some obvious things that are collectively needed, they cannot be done individually. That's where the libertarians, up to that point, I think libertarians are right, but their libertarians are wrong after this. They say, beyond this, the government shouldn't do anything. This morning, actually, I was watching Milton Friedman, the famed libertarian economist who got a Nobel Prize, who influenced both the United States and Britain during the Thatcher and Reagan era, who still influences the thinking of many, many people. That he said, beyond this, government should do nothing. In fact, he did not even talk about roads and things like that. Now, there I disagree. I believe two more things we have to do. One is school education of quality. Higher education doesn't qualify. Because school education is what gives every human being a platform to transcend the discrimination or the disadvantages by birth. The accident of the womb should not determine the child's future. So quality school education, does not matter who delivers it, but government must make sure that everybody gets it, irrespective of birth and economic status. I believe it's vital, particularly in the modern era. It's both a moral necessity and an economic imperative. Moral because you cannot create inequality by birth for no fault of theirs. Removable inequality. I'm not talking about irremovable inequality. Milton Friedman says, or Thomas Sowell says, God made somebody 6 feet, another fellow 5 feet. You cannot remove that. Yes, I agree. That's not my job. Nobody's job is that. But if God or nature gave you brains, and everybody has got brains, it's the society's duty to ensure that that child has the opportunity to fulfill her potential. Those brains are developed. It's a very uniquely human requirement because human beings require 15, 16 years of nurturing to grow up. It's a moral necessity. Otherwise, you're creating a society of perpetual oppression and perpetual advantage by birth, undeserved advantage by birth. That's not right morally. It's also not right economically. If the potential of 80% people is not fulfilled, if their brain power is not tapped, in a modern society as opposed to the ancestral society, ancient society, we require brains to operate machines, to use to solve problems, to deal with modern technology, to create wealth and to fulfill human needs. So both economically and morally, it's the right thing to ensure that there's quality school education. India has singularly failed in that. The greatest welfare mechanism is that. If you really believe in welfare, If you want people to prosper and have a chance in life, the greatest welfare measure is quality school education. Our greatest failing as a country is that. And we are spending a lot of money. It's not allocation of resources. India is spending enormous amount of money. People completely give a wrong impression when they analyze the educational expenditure and the outcomes. They talk about 6% GDP. I don't know where that number has come up. 6% GDP typically is spent in rich countries where educational outcomes are extremely good and where 90 to 95% of the children go to public institutions. In India, educational outcomes are appallingly bad no matter how much you're spending. And the more you spend, the less education seems to be there, because we have increased expenditure dramatically in the last 15, 20 years. And yet educational outcomes either stagnated or declined. So money is not the issue there. And B, a vast proportion of the people, even the poorest people, have given up on public education. They're going to private schools, spending enormous sums out of pocket, disproportionate to their incomes, sacrificing a great deal for their children's future. And yet, because government is the one that decides the educational outcomes ultimately, these kids are not getting better education, not much better. Yesterday I was in Andhra Pradesh. Out of the 84 lakh children in the schools in Andhra Pradesh, 47 lakhs are in private schools. Out of 84 lakhs, nearly 57-58%. When I pointed out to the private school organizations, they said, sir, this number is understated because this only counts first grade to 10th grade. Preschool, another 6 to 7 lakh children are there. That means about 54 lakh children in private schools and only 37 lakh in government schools. Now, you are saying, even when a very small proportion is going to government schools, you must still spend like the West. Even when educational outcomes are appallingly bad, you still should spend more. It's not a budgetary issue, because Andhra Pradesh is spending 1,12,000 rupees per child per year at school, which for India is an enormous amount. It's an enormous amount. Telangana is spending 1,08,000 rupees per child per year at school. And so is the case with many states. There may be some variation depending on the per capita income of each state, but that kind of money is being spent. Outcomes are appallingly bad. So the people who talk about welfare, and I admire their moral fervor, they are ignoring the most important welfare measure. How do you ensure quality education for every single child, irrespective of birth? Is there anything more important, more moral, more vital for the future of this country and that child? The second is healthcare. Earlier, Akshat and I had a brief discussion on healthcare. When 50 to 60 million people are descending into poverty, instead of addressing the descent into poverty, that means addition to poverty, you are trying to give some crumbs to sustain that day. Is that a smart thing? Therefore, welfare is definitely necessary. But at this point of India's national growth, the most important elements of welfare are quality school education and accessible healthcare of quality without a burden of out-of-pocket expenditure on the people of this country. Any other welfare should only be about survival. If there's starvation, we have enough food security in the country. The problem of food is not starvation in India. The problem of food security is malnutrition because of excessive calorie consumption and low protein consumption. I don't know if government is the best answer, but we must figure out a set of solutions. How do you propagate the message, and how do you make sure that pulse is available, more proteins are available, minerals are available, that kind of a thing. It's not a budgetary issue. And barring basic survival, and Indian governments, because after all we are a democracy, we have to carry everybody with us. Indian governments are reasonably good relative to our economic status, reasonably good in welfare delivery. Earlier, even welfare delivery used to be pretty bad. It used to be discriminatory. If you're from my party, from my faction, from my group, you'll get it, otherwise you won't get it. If you pay a bribe, you'll get it, otherwise you won't get it. That was the pattern. But it's getting better. I don't think it's perfect, but digitization and near universalization of welfare. Universalization doesn't mean everybody is getting it, but it's about 70-80% are getting in most states. Therefore, the discrimination is no longer the issue, because practically everybody is getting. The exclusions are very few now. There are exclusions, I'm sure. Even now, deserving people are not getting old age pensions or widow pensions. But that number is shrinking. The second part, corruption in delivery. Digitization is reducing the corruption, if not eliminating altogether. So welfare is getting better and better. And the state after state and the union coming up with more welfare programs. But if you only do welfare, there is something called intergenerational equity. We all owe something to the next generation. Basically, when you say more welfare, other than education, healthcare, you are saying, I consume more. I don't care where it is coming from. It is coming from tomorrow's children's food. It is coming from tomorrow's future, children's future. Now, look at our culture, Indian culture, Hindu, Muslim, Christian, whatever. But the ethos of Indian society is that we sacrifice today for our children's tomorrow. Now, does our government have a right to sacrifice our children's life tomorrow for today? Who gave them the permission? So, welfare is necessary, no question. But redefinition of welfare, or meaningful definition of welfare, and where actually you have to give a handout, some balance. And of course, economically prudent. Welfare must be sustainable. Welfare must give better incentives to behave better. For instance, welfare must be linked to, can it be linked to better education outcomes? Can it be linked to better healthcare outcomes? Can it be linked to better skill promotion? Things of that sort. And welfare must be non-distortionary. My giving welfare must not damage the economy, ultimately do net negative. So, blindly spending more money in the name of the poor is not welfare. It is basically fleecing the next generation, robbing the next generation. It affects intergenerational equity. It guarantees poverty in perpetuity.
So earlier you had spoken about the importance of small towns and the necessity for inclusive growth. But typically, if we see, large cities are the ones that are the engines of growth, both in India and worldwide. And so wouldn't the money that the budget is proposing we spend on tier 2 and tier 3 cities be better spent on making large cities better? And instead, the inclusivity aspect of the growth can be addressed through other means, for example, rural welfare or rural development programs.
Swayambhu, it's not a question of large cities versus small towns. We need large cities. But not everything can be a large city. If your imagination is one of India where there are 100 large cities, each about 1 crore of population on an average, and nothing else left, show me a country where it happened on planet Earth in human history. It doesn't work like that. Take United States, the world's largest economy, by all accounts, until China rose to great prominence, the world's most successful economy in the last 2 centuries. How many large cities do they have? Every city in the United States is smaller than Hyderabad city. And Hyderabad is not the largest city of India. New York, which is widely regarded as capital of the world, sort of, whatever it means, has only about 8 to 9 million population. The next city is Chicago. That's at about 6 million population, 5 or 6 million population. The next cities are Houston and Los Angeles. And after that, you really have to search. Take Britain, London, 8 million population, smaller than Hyderabad. So, large cities are necessary because there's something called cluster effect. There's a reason why Detroit became the automobile capital of the world at that time. There's a reason why Silicon Valley has become the technology capital of the United States. Similarly, in each country, you have certain ecosystem. Once a certain scale and aggregation is there, certain sectors grow dramatically better because their efficiency is there. Therefore, cluster effect is there, it's necessary. But they cannot grow indefinitely. What's happening in large cities? Look at Bengaluru. The traffic is a nightmare. It has other beautiful attributes. I love that city. But everybody talks about the traffic nightmares. The quality of life is actually getting depleted. Look at Delhi. Delhi is the most dynamic urban center of India, even more than Mumbai or some other city, because most financial capital, most intellectual capital, technology, Entrepreneurship and job creation moved to Delhi and surrounding areas. But the pollution in Delhi is now the story of the world. It's a global story. Hyderabad is competing with Bengaluru in traffic and in pollution with Delhi. So your quality of life is declining. Once you go beyond a certain level, no longer there is the benefit of cluster effect, there is actually a loss on account of quality of life and increasing land values, therefore housing becomes unaffordable to most people. Cost of living goes up. When most of the people are at the low end of the spectrum, eking out a precarious livelihood, when an economy cannot afford to pay 100,000 rupees per month, can we pay in this country? Impossible, right? Then, with 15,000 rupees, when people are migrating to Hyderabad or Bengaluru or Chennai, what is happening? Typically, you see, they come alone. They cannot afford to bring their families. They are isolated, completely disconnected from their own traditional networks, family, khandan, caste, the society in which they grew up, whatever. There is no proper housing. Even in Hyderabad, luckily because we're not a terribly cold country, the weather is somewhat kind to people, it's okay. But otherwise, you see people sleeping on the pavement on occasion. Somewhere, some ramshackle place, no proper housing, no proper sanitation. They have to commute 15, 20 kilometers to go to work. And one day they don't find work, they starve. And there's nobody to take care of them. In Indian society, typically somebody else, your neighbors, your friends, your relations, they'll take care of you. There's nobody to take care of you. You're isolated, you're unknown. If you're sick, we already discussed the woes of healthcare in this country, there's a disaster. And there's hardly any welfare system because you came from somewhere else. And therefore, the local state or city has no incentive to provide you a welfare net, such as is available. So lives are miserable. And your 15,000 rupees here gives you very paltry living. Now imagine, many jobs can be easily done in a small town just as they can be done in a big city. There is no advantage in a big city. Actually, there are many disadvantages. A professor of a university cannot be in a small town. A cardiothoracic surgeon cannot be in a small town. A neurosurgeon cannot be in a small town because the skill is such level. Unless there is aggregation of population and people come to seek that kind of expertise, it's not sustainable. But a plumber, a carpenter, a manufacturer of some small electronic goods, or furniture maker, or garment maker, or leather goods, there's no advantage of being in Hyderabad or Chennai or Bengaluru or Delhi because you have electricity there, you have water supply there, you have transport systems there, you have television there, you have mobile phone there, you have digital technology there. So what's the advantage of being in a big city? Cost of production actually is going up. So it's not that big cities should not be there. It's that simultaneously for a wholesome development, small towns must be developed. The idea about rural development, rural welfare. There is no country on earth, and I'm making a very controversial point. This is contrary to the last 60, 70 years of our government policies. There is no country on earth which could improve infrastructure to a level of satisfaction in 600,000 villages and 1.5 million habitats. It never happened. It will never happen. Just as excessive concentration of population is dysfunctional, very big cities after a point, very small habitats are dysfunctional. In the olden days, in the tribal era, when there was hardly anything that you were doing in terms of technologies, basics of life, it made no difference whether you were 50 people, 100 people, or 1,000 people. But now, with economies of scale, electricity, water supply, roads, networks of professions and supply chains, they demand a certain size. Beyond a point too big is dysfunctional for the poor. Too small is impossible to really create supply chains and give infrastructure. In Australia, United States, with vast territories, sometimes small populations, the kind of money that is spent to move people, let's say, with a healthcare problem, a helicopter ferrying you from here to here, hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's ridiculous. It's impossible. So small towns Our imagination of urbanization should be these people from villages. They're all migrating, whether you like it or not. It's not that they want to stay in villages. Let me make another very strong statement. In 99 out of 100 cases, there is a 1% exception. There is almost no villager who wants to stay in the village if an option is available. Villages are getting depopulated. Almost no young man or woman of ability and ambition is remaining in the village. Because you like it or not, the future is in urbanization. So anyway, they're moving. The issue is whether they move to a big city in a helpless and desperate manner and have very, very unhappy lives, miserable lives, or a small town and there's a path to middle class and prosperity. So small towns are necessary. The government doesn't have to spend much money there. You just have to do enough for town planning. In any case, you are supposed to be doing that. If the governments don't do town planning, and Milton Friedman would not agree that government should exist. That is the minimal role of the government. You're planning for the town, the roads and other things. No, simply you can't have anarchy in the name of free market, right? And transport. Other things anyway you're supposed to be doing, rural or urban, water supply and so on and so forth. Rest of it the private sector will do. Sites and services, even schools, unfortunately with the government's failure, let's hope the government will improve. But irrespective of that, in every case, private sector will come in. Population congregates, schools will come, health centers will come. So all you have to do is a minimal thing, minimal infrastructure and town planning, and give a signal that we want to encourage small manufacturing, low-end skills to be deployed in this town, but in an orderly manner. That's enough.
Sir, you earlier mentioned that education is the greatest welfare and the greatest failure also. I wanted to ask you that the economic survey, the recent economic survey mentioned that enrollments and educational outcomes are improving. So now the union government decided to focus more on university, townships and higher education. If, let's say, the union government is doing enough, don't you think the state government needs to get its act together?
There's no question about it. Ultimately, most of the day-to-day governance issues and basic services are with the states. In the 7th schedule of the Constitution, it's the states that are in charge. Actually, the true power in India is in the states. It's the glitterati and the movers and shakers, or so they think, and the television channels and newspapers that are obsessed with the national capital and the national government. The real power and real ability to transform the future of the people lies in states and increasingly with chief ministers, because power is concentrated in the chief minister's hands. It can't be addressed by the union budget or union government. And states must shape up. Education, healthcare, rule of law, small town development, and making your state and your towns and cities attractive for investment from all over the country and the world. It is a state's job. And if they fail to do that, the states will suffer. Already you are seeing some kind of a divide in the country. States which are a little more progressive in these matters, they're getting more investment. If there are more skills, better infrastructure, better investment-friendly climate, and better ease of doing business, and some slightly better educational skills and slightly better healthcare, etc., they're attracting. Tamil Nadu is attracting a lot of investment, for instance. Gujarat is attracting a lot of investment, different kinds of investment, not necessarily the same in each state, because again, the characteristics of states vary. But some other states are languishing. There's no doubt about it. So not only is it necessary to improve the lot of people, but also to attract investment, because we are today truly in a competitive federalism, which is a good thing. If states and cities compete for economic growth and investment, then it's a good thing. Instead of you and I planning and telling them what to do. Earlier, government used to tell them, all right, I'll establish a factory here, I will not establish a factory here. So the government is the mover and the shaker. The government is Brahma, Vishnu and Maheshwara. They created enterprises, they sustained them, they killed them. In the most part, they killed them. Today, it's no longer the case. It is now you and I. What is private sector? Market decides. That means whoever is investing decides, and market has plenty of choices. They will go where they think there's the best opportunity, which is a good thing. And insofar as the big cities and university cities are concerned, I have no opposition to that. I don't even have a ready solution, I must be candid. About 20 years ago, 21 years ago, I visited China as a part of a small delegation of 5 people. The others were very distinguished. I cannot say that of myself, but a former Union Cabinet Minister, Dr. Y.K. Alak, Planning Commission Deputy Chairman, former Foreign Secretary, Mr. Salman Haider. He was also ambassador to China earlier. A very distinguished retired civil servant, Mr. Manmohan Malhotra. And at that time, the Planning Commission member, Saida Hamid. So the 5 of us were there. Umpteen number of people in the Chinese academia, they came up to us and they told us of their admiration for Indian higher education. Basically, what they know, what they heard is Indian brands of IIM and IIT. These brands are now globally famous, and they were admiring. We all knew our own failings. Obviously, on foreign soil, we would not like to expose ourselves in a bad way. So we remained silent. They talked about how wonderful higher education in India is, and how terrible higher education in China is. By the time, China was already at the top in school education. Then and now, China provides first-rate school education. The 2009 PISA survey, the global survey at the age of 15 for educational outcomes, in which India also participated, the only time we participated, India ranked second from the bottom, China ranked at the top. You may say there is pressure on the kids and all that. All that can be improved. There's a lot of pressure on Indian kids too. So all these are excuses. There's a lot of pressure on Japanese kids too. The methodology, the pedagogy, we can improve, but all these are excuses. It's not that, our children are without any pressure, our children are growing up as beautiful, wonderful citizens. Let's not find excuses. We simply bombed. China is doing remarkably well. And once they recognize that higher education, they're not doing as well as they should, last 20 years is a miracle. They did whatever it took. Today, China is next only to the United States in higher education. Last night, a co-passenger in the aircraft, a cardiologist, now in Australia, but an Indian cardiologist, is telling me how incredibly great Chinese technology, particularly robotics, is in surgery. He's saying, no, sorry, it's not America, it's not Britain. Robotic surgery, China is the king. So, when they were envious of the rest of India 20 years ago, today they are envy of the world. It's not merely throwing investment. You must create that culture. Our public universities, I'm sorry to say this, in the large part have collapsed. And our private universities are still in the early stage. Great universities cannot be created, in my judgment, overnight. It's not merely a function of money. It's also creating a culture of learning, a culture of debate and discussion, a culture of academic freedom, a culture of innovation, a culture of respecting true scholarship as opposed to bogus scholarship. And therefore, my own view is, you must put in more money, no question about it. But more than money, you must create that ambience where academic excellence, innovation, research and development, they grow. And for that, for my 2 pence worth, I'm not an expert in the subject, my own approach would be enlarge the great universities, and they're already successful because it's easier to transplant the practices and make it bigger, rather than create new universities. We are very fond of creating new universities. Every district has a university now in Telangana, Andhra, I don't know honestly what these people do. I hope they're doing something for the kids of this country. But I'm not very confident of that. Because merely spending some money, building a building and appointing a vice chancellor does not make it a university. A university must have a culture, it must have a tradition, it must have a lot more than merely buildings and staff. I think higher education, a much deeper thinking is required to make it work for our country.
Now, sir, you earlier alluded to the woes of the healthcare sector in our country. So I was thinking there may be a glimmer of hope, a slight glimmer of hope on that front. So the PMJ scheme or the Ayushman Bharat scheme has been winning hearts left, right and center. In fact, many states have followed suit. AP was some sort of a pioneer on that front, and they've now announced that rupees 25 lakh medical cover per family per year. So with this model in place, can we finally say that healthcare is reaching each and every citizen of the country?
Short answer is no. As you said, Andhra Pradesh is the pioneer. Dr. Rajasekhar Reddy as Chief Minister started this Arogyasri. Even then I was skeptical. As a general principle, I'm definitely in favor of the expenditure, health expenditure for the catastrophic interventions being shifted to the government instead of burdening the citizen. I think to some extent it did that well. The hospitalization expenditure, particularly for surgical interventions, are shifted from the individual and the family, when you're poor, however they are defined, to the state. To that extent, it's okay. But healthcare outcomes have not improved. These are two different things. We're getting confused. I talked to you about 39,000 or so disability-adjusted life years lost in the country, of which probably 20,000 can be saved. There is hardly any movement in there.
Right.
And if there's any movement, it's not because of programs like this. It's because of normal progression of time and technology and other improvements in our governance. Now, it doesn't mean that it's unworthy to shift the burden from the individual to the state. It means that a lot more should be done, a lot more should be integrated. Unless the first level of primary care, the first point of contact, apart from public health, water supply, sanitation, sewerage, that is public health, vaccination, immunization. At least some of them we are good. Immunization we are pretty good. India is, not everywhere are we bad. In immunization, India is definitely of very high quality. Though our immunization schedules are limited, it's expanded. Modi government has expanded. They call it Indradhanush. Now I think 12 or 14 vaccines are given universally. And luckily in India, we don't have the silliness of the vaccine skepticism like you see in the West. People are very practical in this country, much more practical than many of these so-called advanced countries. And it's working. And other public health issues, we know. Water supply, sanitation, other things. Work in progress. We have to keep on improving. I'm not talking of that. I'm talking about the first point of contact, that primary care. That is our weakest link. Though we established way back in 1950s, 60s, the Bohr Committee, etc., primary health centers and all kinds of things. On paper it exists, but in reality, in the large part, it stinks. Now, unless that point is corrected, what happens is a problem that's addressable in the beginning is elevated to a hospital care problem, sometimes a surgical intervention problem. Now, that we are putting money. And you are saying, I'm now relieving you of the burden. Obviously, if instead of me paying 1 lakh rupees bill, you picks up the bill, will I be unhappy? Unless I'm absolutely an idiot with an IQ of 0 or something, I'll be quite happy. Somebody else is picking my bill. But is it the best use of the money? Is it the first thing to be done? Or is there something else to be done along with that? That's the question we have to ask of ourselves. What is the best value for the money? The second broader point. Healthcare is an area where expenditure keeps going up and up and up all over the world. As for an individual, for a family, for a society, for a country. Because after all, who doesn't want better health? Who doesn't want to live longer? If God forbid I have some very serious illness, let's say there is a technology available which costs maybe just about 10 crores to extend my lifespan by 1 year. In my mind, my life is worth the 10 crores for 1 year. But it's not my mind that matters when you have to spend the money. If I have the money, if I spend that money, it's okay. It's for me to make a decision. But the moment you shift that burden to the state, is that the best use for the money? The principle of triage. If I spend so much money in healthcare, how much of quality of life am I giving, totality, with that same money? If I'm saving 1,000 lives versus I'm probably prolonging 1 year's life, what is the ratio? 1,000 lives, 1 year's one person's life. So these are the hard choices in public management. The third problem, 25 lakhs of Andhra Pradesh. They are thinking of basically if you think that Andhra Pradesh government certainly has enormous love for the people and they want to improve the health of everybody, there's a fervor there, I think you're being a little naive. It's a political ploy to make sure that the re-election is certain. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a legitimate political ploy. But is it a rational political ploy just because it's legitimate? 25 lakh rupees in today's India is about 10 times the GDP per capita. If there is no income stream into the kitty, like United States for even the limited kind of public expenditure on healthcare, they have 2.3% tax only dedicated to healthcare for the Medicare purpose. Again, this surgeon from Australia is telling me in Australia, they pay a certain tax towards healthcare every citizen pays, and then your intervention at the government level is free, but there is a queue system, there are going to be inevitable delays because unlimited demand and limited supply. If they go to private sector, they have to pay co-payments and then they get faster service. So you have to make it sustainable. What happens with this 25 lakh kind of a thing is, what they call supplier-induced demand will now be generated. I have a slight knee problem. I'm now 70. With age, some of us have knee problems, some have prostate problems, some have some other problems. It's part of aging. There are two ways of managing these conditions. One is a conservative management as far as practicable. Don't go for high cost, very radical interventions unless it's really warranted. The other is go for knee transplantation the moment I have a knee pain. Go for prostate resection the moment I have a prostate problem or something else. Both are perfectly okay. But if it's not in the best interest of the patient or society, it becomes a supplier-induced demand. Now, once you jack up the kind of money is available like this, there's a way of spending that money. I guarantee you that. Today, it appears to be a small amount. Andhra Pradesh government says, no, we're spending 4,000 crores now. By the way, there are pending bills there. In that 4,000 crores, some 1,000, 2,000 crores they have not paid. And overall pending bills in Andhra Pradesh are about 1 lakh crores plus to all kinds of contractors or suppliers or Arogyasri or hospital, schools, or colleges for fee reimbursement. Same thing with Telangana. So it's not that you're honoring your commitments, by the way. You don't have money to fulfill your existing commitments. You are now adding to your commitments. But let's leave that aside. The supplier-induced demand will keep growing. Without improving healthcare, you are basically transferring the public money into private pockets, not of individuals, not the poor, but somebody else, and in the wrong way. The same money could be utilized in the system to actually build the economy, create jobs, improve quality of life, but now it's going down the drain because you are in search of votes. So it looks very nice. If I give money, who doesn't want it? It's human. But public money is limited. What is the best value for the money you spend? And are you actually achieving the objective? Is there any study of that? Is there any country on earth where it said, I reimburse anything up to 10 times your GDP per capita and no problem? Show me one country that ever said that and survived. But the problem is, the downside will not appear immediately. Upside is vote today and popularity today. Downside is 3 years later, 5 years later, the state and the people and the future taxpayers, the next generation, they pay a humongous price. That is the biggest challenge of politics. The short-term maximization of the vote for the politician and the long-term price the society has to pay. As some very wise people say, if a decision maker does not face the consequences of his decisions, it's always a dangerous situation. A decision maker benefits from a decision. I'm talking of public decisions for the general public in the public governance, but you don't pay the price. Somebody else pays the price. What's not to like it? So it looks nice, 25 lakhs. Or why not 1 crore? What is the sanctity of 25 lakhs? Why not 10 crores? There is a therapy, now I'm told, for thalassemia, etc. In the UK, I think one of the universities pioneered the therapy where by gene therapy you can actually cure it. It only costs £1 million. Why not that? So let's be a little careful.
So, one final question to wrap up our discussion. So, this will be on the broader theme of fiscal management, since that is a large part of the budget's theme this time. So, as far as that goes, the union government's record has been really good. But as we have been discussing earlier, the state governments are where real governance happens. And in this area, we see rather poor fiscal management. So, why do you think the budget this time failed to address that and offer measures for disciplining poor fiscal management at the state level?
To be fair, it's not a budgetary issue, it's not an allocation issue, but a roadmap should have been given. The 16th Finance Commission also mentioned that, talked about that. In FTR, we have been very concerned about it because we have flagged the issue of fiscal management and fiscal health of states as one of the key challenges of the future and potentially impeding growth and undermining the future of our children. And luckily, the constitutional makers were very wise. They anticipated this. Therefore, they treated India as an indivisible whole in terms of the fiscal management of the country is concerned. They actually used the expressions financial stability and credit of India. They recognized this is national. It is not about subnational things. While federalism is real and it's getting stronger, there cannot be federalism in management of public finances. If each constituent unit behaves as if it's independent and does whatever it wants, the whole of India's credit is undermined and the financial stability of the whole country is undermined. Therefore, the Constitution provided for financial emergency, but without waiting for that, it provided for Article 293, whereby the state's debt is regulated. The union government is failing to do that. So far, I think the honest verdict is the union government, because of neglect, because of lack of capacity, because of political fears, because if union government says, look, you should not spend more on revenue, you have to curtail your expenditure, they'll say, I want to give a lot of nice things to the poor people, and the Prime Minister of India is stopping it. In a political environment, nobody wants to be seen to be stopping anything. So they're terrified. Everybody wants votes. That's why we have to depoliticize this. If you take it away from the political decision making, like Reserve Bank of India and the Monetary Policy Committee, MPC, they decide the interest rates. Now, government may have a viewpoint. They may even express their viewpoint, but ultimately there is a professional, non-political decision making. Similarly, when to intervene in the market, when not to intervene, to buy dollars, to sell dollars, whatever, RBI makes professional decisions. So if you depoliticize as much as possible, make it professional, non-partisan, and expert-based, it will be helpful. I wish, if not today, nothing is lost. The Government of India, the Finance Ministry come up with a viable roadmap utilizing Article 293 in a transparent manner so that slowly, because overnight you cannot improve the state's finances. If there is a serious deficit now, you can't say tomorrow stop it because then the salaries will stop, welfare will stop, administration will stop. But you have to have a roadmap. Because we are still a reasonably fast-growing economy, 7-8%, that gives us some elbow room. Supposing we're not growing at all, then 1 lakh crores pending bills and revenue deficit, that means expenditure exceeding the revenues, it will be unsustainable. Because we're growing at 7-8%, let us assume, let's say, in the coming years, not next year immediately, a nominal growth rate of 11-12% is there. 7-8% growth and 4-5% inflation, or 12% nominal growth. That means revenues are going to grow at 12%. Supposing your increase in expenditure, you curtail it to 4 or 5% for some years. It's not that difficult. We're not even saying reduce expenditure. Curtail increase. Don't simply go, whole hog and spend more than what you have. Then within 5-6 years, the numbers change. The denominator is increasing, the growth, overall cake. Numerator is decreasing, therefore the proportion of debt in GDP or GSDP is coming down. So it's not an insurmountable problem, but some states are making it insurmountable. The two Telugu states are pretty much in the forefront of it, sadly. They're spending as if there's no tomorrow, there's no day of reckoning. They're increasing revenue expenditure without any restraint. No, Government of India must discipline because there is no way they can spend money without debt, because if they have their own money, there's no issue. They are spending borrowed money for current expenditure. That is where the problem is. That means you are basically stealing from the children, next generation, the unborn children, and the youngsters of today. And these children are powerless to fight you because you are the one in power. You are the adults today. You are taking away from the future. So there's nobody to resist it. That's the problem. The resistance has to come from the constitutional mechanisms. Article 293. We must have a basic safeguard that whatever you do, it's your choice because the states are sovereign within the Union of India. But your choice does not extend to destroying the unborn child's future. Therefore, you cannot borrow to spend for current expenditure today. Whatever you do not borrow, if it's from your own revenues, including Government of India's fiscal devolution, if you spend, it's up to you. If you spend it more wisely, better. But unwisely also, people gave you the mandate. But nobody gave you the mandate to borrow to spend today, depleting the children's future. I think that rule must be progressively enforced. It must be done through a non-partisan mechanism like CAG. Some other mechanism must be created so that people have confidence. You will not use it for partisan political ends. You will not favor a political party in a state. You will not oppose another political party in a state. I think it's time that we really looked at it. And the Finance Commission talked about it, and almost every serious economist is talking about it. And I hope it will be taken up very soon.
So with this, we've come to the end of the conversation. Thank you so much for your time and your insights. And thank you for tuning in, everybody.